Hi there. Welcome to the 12th Annual Emerging Leaders Conference. My name is Tammy Cowart. I'm on faculty here at UT Tyler and the Associate Director for the UT Tyler Center for Ethics. And I want to talk to you today about how to develop a leadership action plan. So how can you go about carrying out some of the projects that you'd like to accomplish, or one specific project that you'd like to accomplish. And I want to give you really five, I hope, simple steps to creating and managing projects. So I think it's really important to have a very specific approach, and we always want to start with the basic question of what is your goal? What is your purpose? What do you really want to accomplish as part of your project? And to do that, you first need to understand what is the need. What's the problem? What's the issue or the need that you have on your campus or in your community, in an organization, maybe on campus, that you need to address. And in order to do this, you need to have some basic information. So you want to maybe do interviews or surveys on your campus or in your community and ask people, either kind of in an interview format or hand them an anonymous survey, or do it through email, for example, to say, do you think this is a problem on our campus? If we take the issue, for example, of making your campus look nicer, beautification of your campus. You may think that that's a very important issue on campus. We need trees and flowers to be planted in the flower beds. So you should ask faculty, do they think that's a problem? Do they think it's a need that should be addressed? Ask students, do they think that's a need that should be addressed? How important is it on a scale of 1 to 10? Those are things that can help you define a really successful project when you understand not just what you think the need is, but what are the people who will be affected by your project, what do they think the need is? You also want to define the scope of your project. So if you think about, making your campus more beautiful, are you going to do that just on your campus? Are you going to do that across the school district? So maybe at the elementary school and the middle school and the high school. So you're going to expand the scope of the project. Are you going to make it community-wide or city-wide? Or do you do something that impacts the state of Texas or the entire country or the world? So that's what we mean by scope. Obviously, the need and the resources you will require, are going to be different based on the scope. And so all those things have to work together. We can say we want to do something that impacts the world, but you're going to need a lot more resources to address the scope of a problem like that, right? Who needs to be involved? So, sometimes there are things that you can think of. If we talk about campus beautification again, there are things that you could do and implement on your campus that might be fairly easy to do, and you don't need to necessarily ask for a lot of permissions to do that. But perhaps if you're going to do campus beautification, you need to talk to people at the facilities department on your campus or in the school district. You probably need to get permission from the principal if you're going to dig holes. Maybe if there's city water lines that run through your campus, you also need to contact the city to make sure that you don't dig down to plant a tree and bust a water line. So there are lots of questions that you may need to address about who needs to be involved in this project, who do you need to consult with in order to get your project accomplished. And then who's going to benefit? And that sort of goes back to the need as well, but you want to know, who do we need to, at the end of the project, who do we need to talk to see, okay, did this project, were the outcomes what we thought they were going to be? And we'll get to that in more detail in one of the later steps, but you need to understand who's going to benefit. Very specifically, your target audience as precisely as possible. So maybe it's just 9th grade students. Maybe it's just high school seniors. Maybe it's people who live in a square mile of your campus, right? So maybe you're going to go out, you're going to pick up trash just in the area around your campus. So maybe that's who benefits. It's just the people that surround your campus. Or again, maybe it's your community or your city. So understand who's going to benefit from your project. That's step one. Step two, what are your action items? So what are the things that you need to decide on that you're going to have to accomplish in order to complete whatever your goal is? So it's always good to have a brainstorming session for ideas about some of these action items. So what will need to be done once you've defined the need and your target audience, and how you're going to accomplish that, what you want the outcome to be, what will you need to do? Who's going to do it? So maybe what kinds of people do you need to be involved? Maybe if it's a campus beautification project, maybe you want to contact a horticulturist to come tell you what kind of trees or plants you should plant around your building. And then when does it need to be completed? So you'll need to think about, your task. And again, if we're talking about campus beautification, we probably wouldn't want to plant. Let's say there's times of the year when we plant trees, and there are times of the year in Texas when we don't plant trees. And so you don't want to execute that project during the time of the year when it's bad to plant trees, which I think in Texas is probably the heat of summer. We don't plant trees in the heat of summer because we don't have enough water. It's too hot. And so those are things that you would need to set up as well in making sure that the project can be completed. Step three is really sort of putting that down on paper, and I'll provide you with the document to kind of give you a starting point for developing really roles and timelines, and deciding when does the project need to be completed on a timeline. Who's responsible for what? So it's important to define roles and expectations for each of those roles. So who's going to be the chair? Who's going to kind of oversee that all the pieces are accomplished, all the tasks are accomplished in a timely manner? Maybe you have other roles, and each of those roles need to have expectations as well. So maybe there's someone in charge of outreach. And so that person then is going to have specific tasks that are going to go out into the community to maybe get donations of supplies. If we go back to the campus beautification example, to go to a nursery and ask for donations of trees or flowers, to go to Walmart and ask for donations of a hoe and a shovel or something along that line. So who's going to be in charge of outreach, and when do those things need to be provided? So you wouldn't go get flowers and bring them back to campus 2 months before you're going to plant them, right? So when does that task need to be accomplished? Maybe you need somebody for recruitment of volunteers, and so that person is going to have a whole different set of tasks and a whole different timeline as well. So that person needs to go out and get volunteers, and the volunteers need to be available to show up on the date of the project. And so that person's tasks and expectations will be different from others. So that's a really important piece. And then setting checkpoints for progress. So, whether the chair of the project, the leader of the project has a weekly meeting, or maybe just a monthly meeting to check in and see where are we, how are we going, how are we doing on the progress, have people made their contacts, does somebody need help? Maybe there's too much in this one area, and so sometimes it's good to make adjustments for those kinds of things. And doing that, kind of progressing through that, helps us to get to the point where then we can launch the project, complete our tasks, and then have measurable outcomes that we can report. And that's where we'll get to the communication piece. So it's important throughout to be able to communicate the plan with your stakeholders, and your stakeholders are the people who have an interest or a stake in your project. So you want to communicate that really well throughout with faculty, with students, with administrators, with people who are going to be affected by your project. And then also you want to make sure that you're communicating well with each other, that you're working together as a team, that you're reporting when it's time for you to report. You're providing the information about your tasks, that you're saying, this is a lot for me and I need help. Is there someone else who can help me with my task? That's a really important part of communication too, is to sometimes say, I'm not able to complete the things I thought I could. This is harder than I thought it was. I need some help. And the team should be able to say, oh, okay, well, then we'll all pitch in for those things that you need help with too. And then making sure that you're measuring the outcomes. So doing things like quantitative and qualitative assessments. So going back to the people you surveyed at the very beginning when you were deciding on the need for the project and saying, hey, did we meet the need? Did this project sort of serve, do you think the campus looks nicer than it did? Does it look the way you thought it would? Do you wish there were more flowers? Do you think it would look good if we had more trees? Is that enough trees? Those are things that are really good kind of assessments that you can do. Also quantitative things. So one way of being able to make sure that you can demonstrate that your project was really successful is measuring the quantitative things. How many volunteers did we have? How many hours did our volunteers spend on the project? How many donated resources were we able to collect? How much money did we raise then with fundraising that we could spend on the project? So how did we manage the budget maybe for that project? How many people were impacted? So maybe you collected goods for a food bank project that were then distributed. So how many people were impacted by the goods that we distributed, maybe at a food drive-through? Those kinds of things are really great ways of being able to demonstrate. Like you may think we had a great project and that was really good, but you always want to be able to communicate that back in a demonstrable way to stakeholders and to others who might be interested in knowing about your project. So measure those outcomes. Make sure you're always setting yourself up to measure those outcomes. And then going back to see, hey, that goal we had, and number one of our steps, was that tangible and measurable? Were we actually able to measure our goal, what we determined was the need at the very beginning? So again, those kinds of things, money raised, time that passed, survey results, all of those things can be very valuable in determining whether or not the project really was successful. And by the way, oftentimes it's really okay if it's not as successful as we thought it was going to be, because that can be valuable information that we can pass on or that we can use in future projects to say, we thought this would be a really great project and it was okay, but it may have been better if we had kind of tweaked it and gone in a different direction. So those kind of learning experiences are actually really good too, even when they're not 100% what we thought they were going to be. And then again, making sure that you're communicating the results, those measurable results of your project with your faculty and your students. Now, what I want you to do is to begin to work together to create your own leadership action plan. And each school will record a 10-minute presentation about your plan. I want you to be creative in your presentation. So think of ways that you can creatively demonstrate what your plan was and how you executed it. But also, it's really good to make it professional. So dress nicely in your presentation. Make sure that you're using good lighting, a good background, speak really clearly, look into the camera when you do your presentation. And then also you'll be invited back to campus in the spring to present the outcomes of your plan. And so we'll be able to visit with you and hear about the results of your plan in the spring after you have completed your presentation. I know they're going to be really great presentations, and we really look forward to hearing from you in the spring. Good luck.